Okay, now let's me finish this up. I think I should have the time to do it. Again, we went over from the Vatican, 2004. This is just, again, a long series of things that I'm doing, showing, documenting, going over all the documents that I've printed over the years, proving the New World Order and contributing to the cause of sharing the information that we need to, as hopefully someday as weapons that can be used. I guess just in case, if the globalists and New World Order people, if they ever get brought to justice, we'll have all the facts with us, and this is a little contribution that could be useful in that situation. All the proof that we need that of who the people and organizations are that are bringing this New World Order about, ever brought to trial. Well, documented facts like this would help bury them even deeper. So now we're on the page 13 of this. Globalization, Justice, and Charity by H.E. MSGR, assuming it's Monsignor or whatever, Marcelo Sanchez Serrando, Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Go look it up if you want. The emergency list to promote a participative society, as the late Professor P.L. Zampetti termed it, must begin with the tragedy of world hunger. Again, they're using, all the chaos and trouble that many of these organizations have helped create. St. Thomas's statement, quote, in cases of need all things are common property, which summarizes Christian tradition and guides it, is well known. The goods of the earth, including those that are in private hands, it's private property. He's selling the looting and the theft of people's personal private property, something that is a huge foundational thing in our Constitution. That it was a real strong belief that the founding fathers of private property rights. So it's the goods of the earth, including those that are in private hands, have an original and universal destiny, which is to serve all men. So he's using nice language. Nice charitable language to talk about the theft of, the taking away of people's private property and private property rights. It is not theft. Therefore, it is not theft, properly speaking, to take secretly and use another's property in a case of extreme need, because that which he takes for the support of his life becomes his own property by reason of that need. Again, it's just, these people are clever snakes. They know how to sell their socialism. You can go into cases of Russia, China, and all these other communist countries. Whenever they promise to do something like that, it never happens anyways. People still go poor. People still starve to death. So anyways. Christians ask God to give them their daily nutrition. Quote, give us this day our daily bread. We cannot accept or tolerate that 815 million people living in desperate need starve to death. Today we know that sending food aid to hunger-stricken regions does not represent a lasting and sustainable solution. They love to use that word, sustainable. Instead, it is necessary to find a way of enabling the poor countries to develop their own economies. And this will be achieved not just by offering them technological assistance, but above all by having developed countries abolish subsidies and protectionist measures altogether, for they only benefit farmers from rich nations to the detriment of those from the south of the planet. Oh, abolish subsidies and protectionist measures. Eliminate them altogether. Wow. While there are maybe enough resources to combat hunger, there is not a political will to do so as yet. He's quoting somebody here, unquote. Governments should think of peace and not war, as Paul VI invoked and as John Paul II cries out today, and they should get back part of the enormous expenditure for weapons cause of inconceivable sufferings and death of so many innocents, to produce bread and means of subsistence for that fifth of humanity who lives in misery. Again, a lot of the people that were part of that war machine belong to these very organizations that are putting out, this crap. It's part of the dialectic process. That's the last video I showed, and that one page you said. It's part of the dialectical process the New World Order is. Unsustainable debt, flight capital flows, and high interest rates. It is not enough, however, to feed the hungry. It is also necessary to assure to each man a life that befits his dignity. The agenda for reform must involve increasing the benefits from trade and capital flows. In particular, capital inflows have to be carefully managed. First, countries should design comprehensive plans to attract long-term investment. Such plans should include a stable political climate, an educated labor force, active technological policies, incentives for domestic firms, and clear priorities on what sectors direct foreign investment should go to. Second, developing countries should tightly control the speculative movements of short-term capital to influence both their volume and their composition. There is another point to be made which is usually not referred to in any way, never emphasized with due force. A country should not be obliged to pay excessive interest on its national debt. Just as there is a fair wage, so also should there be a fair interest rate. I would like to observe on this point that in the Republic of Italy there are state anti-usury laws which are applied to bank interest rates. Could this principle not be extended to an international context? Again, he's going to mix in, some good things with the bad. He's going to promise, these documents, I'm just showing how they call for a new world order and how they sprinkle throughout these documents the real nature of it, which is really just tyranny. But in the midst of that, too, he's going to sprinkle stuff that's going to make it sound good. Manly P. Hall did it, Alice Bailey, all these other top socialists in the occult and other organizations do it. Relaunching education is the first task of a global world. However, the central reality on which today, more than ever before, we should place emphasis is education. Science, which involves the production, acquisition, and transmission of knowledge, and education make up an increasingly interdependent system that shapes life on this planet. The organization of scientific advance has certainly come to be a much more difficult task than the management of the world's wealth. Who's going to manage the world's wealth? Education, a specific right of the human being, inasmuch as he is a rational being, which should be the most human and effective way to promote freedom, fraternity, and social equality. Yeah, you remember when I went over the freedoms Alice Bailey was talking about, and how it's just really a perversion of freedom. It's not individual God-given rights, freedom, if you believe in that, God-given, whatever. But if you believe in freedom as it should be, and how the founders defined it or whatever, that's not freedom when socialists talk about it. Fraternity, well, we know who uses that word a lot. Social equality, which is, code word for socialism, collectivism, is becoming more and more a factor of discrimination and exclusion. It is well known that the lack of quality, current values in technology, and quantity, schooling and retention rate in education is one of the causes of extreme poverty. The reality in South Asia is that 58% of women and 35% of men are illiterate. Today we live in a knowledge society. That is why it is necessary to extend to everyone and improve the quality of the educational services necessary to take part in. Indeed, a fair and equitable society distinguishes itself for the level and extent of its education. Family, first social institution that must be strengthened. Globalization and development have also been accompanied by institutional changes. In order to renew society, the first social institution that deserves justice is the family, which on the contrary is currently neglected in this process of globalization by current state-based and market-based and mixed approaches, which either treat society as a collection of individuals in competition with one another for scarce resources, or treat the family as a public instrument to remedy failures of state and market. The key role of the family as a cell of society, school of communion and participation that has vital and organic bonds with all of society, must be restored. The family must recover her vocation as a servant of life, trainer of people, and educator in the faith, and promoter of integral development in view of achieving the common good. Ethics, religious options, ecumenism, that's, I guess it's religious unity, whatever. Overlapping consensus. Catholic social doctrine is convinced that globalization requires this large number of economic, political, institutional, and cultural measures. But at the same time, it believes that these measures have to be based upon ethical principles and motivations. Yeah, ethical, I'm sure. Yeah, they have a whole history of ethical, showing ethical principles and motivations, don't they? The Inquisition. The main question here is the actual sources of and contributors to these ethical values. It is significant that in this context, Catholic social doctrine refers to a new ecumenical spirit. That's all about that New World Religion stuff. This means that the Church is convinced that the challenges of globalization can only be met by an ecumenical effort on the part of the Christian churches, the great religions of the world, and all men and women of goodwill. Goodwill. We heard that goodwill in the Lucis Trust books. Goodwill organization or whatever. That's within the Lucis Trust. So that, anyways, that's uniting all the religions of the world in a new world religion. Globalization has increased the dialogue between the great religious traditions and cultures, which now better understand and recognize one another. This dialogue is becoming more and more essential, due mainly to the appearance of new forms of fundamentalism, which try to use religions in favor of egotistic interests motivated by hatred. This dialogue could also provide the basis for the establishment of ethical principles and values of universal scope based on justice and love. This converges with the new idea of an overlapping consensus. Thus, rather than ignoring or avoiding differences between religions and cultures in line with the idea of tolerance that concluded the wars of religion in the Christian West, we can agree with what John Rawls proposes in his final major work, The Idea of an Overlapping Consensus. He argues that it is now necessary to engage in a further step forward, that is to say, to recognize that the rival of metaphysical ideas that have lain behind and still animate the strong beliefs of citizens of the Western democracies can underpin a minimum corpus of beliefs that can help, in a positive sense, to create a reflective equilibrium. He is referring here to certain comprehensive theories of a moral, philosophical, or religious kind, which can, despite their mutual opposition, work together through their overlapping to achieve the joint establishment of the specific values of a democracy that can survive in a historical and sociological context characterized by the fact of pluralism. Now, we know that democracy has really not much to do with freedom. It's the promise of freedom, sure, but it never works out. And it's nowhere in our Constitution, that D word. And it's really the step right before socialism. The social edification of forgiveness. There is also the need for the peoples of all the nations of the earth to be compassionate towards one another, and to imagine the suffering of others when invoking revenge for the wounds that were inflicted in the past. As John Paul II has observed, there is a need for a purification of the collective memory, to remember positive things and to forget negative things. Oh yeah, just forget the negative things, like the all these, because he goes on, that have occurred in the history of the human family. Yeah, just forget, too, including all the deception and the death and the misery caused by these elites. Anyways, what is asked for here is something that is formally similar to forgiveness, which is based on charity. Yeah. Of course, if on the one hand charity goes beyond justice, on the other we must prevent it from replacing justice. Charity remains a surplus, an additional resource, and this surplus of charity, compassion, and respectful affection is capable of providing globalization with a more solidarity-inspired soul, full of profound motivation, audacity, and new energy. From this viewpoint, the Christian churches have an important role to play insofar as they are the direct recipients of the pressing legacy of the gospel, which calls for forgiveness and love for one's enemies. John Paul II's effort to practice forgiveness in order to restore the full unity of the Christian churches. That's the unity of the Christian churches under them as authority, because the Vatican wants their new world order. And to proceed hand in hand with non-Christians and non-believers in the human family appears all the more an example to be followed in order to give a dense content of charity to the project for a new evangelization after the Second Vatican Council. Thus, to the challenge of the globalization, the Church responds with the new evangelization centered on the doctrine and praxis of Christ, who reveals to the human being the depths of his humanity, his being, and his acting. And that ends this right here. Printed by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in June 2004. I guess I can keep going now. It hasn't stopped yet. Maybe I can find the Pope calling for a new world order. I have to go because YouTube hides everything and then calls it a conspiracy theory. It don't exist. There was this old footage, though, and it used to be on here. It used to be very easy to find. It wasn't the current Pope, because we know that current Pope is, just a globalist shill. There's a picture of Pope Francis even doing this, right? Whatever, I can't find it. I'll try to look for it for my next video, because I also have another document I want to read from the Vatican that's all about the redistribution of our wealth and collectivist world government. This is from the Vatican's own website, Vatican.va, 2014. I printed that off. But anyways, Pope Francis hides hand and coat. Because we know all these occult Illuminati people, and we know the Vatican's been infiltrated for the most part successfully. I mean, we know. I have a Catholic Bible. There's one picture of Pope Francis on a bus right here. Yeah, so we know. Jesuits calling for a new world order, and obviously this, so they're definitely a big part of it. But the Vatican, for the longest time, they had this war going on with the Freemasons, whatnot, and they banned the Freemasons from joining Catholicism until it was lifted, and I mean, they got infiltrated, so now they're just a big part of the Illuminati scheme of, the New World Order. Even though it wouldn't matter, I think that, the Catholic the Vatican is just a corrupt institution even before the secret societies infiltrated it, in my opinion, because they just they would have wanted their own new world order, just one based on where they would be the ones ruling the world, and we would have global inquisitions and tortures and shit. But yeah, that's pretty much does it for so have a good night.